But to kick us off today, I'm really delighted to welcome a couple of my friends from South Central Connecticut and Workforce Alliance. I have Jill Watson and Ann Harrison with me to kick off the day. So no pressure, ladies. You're the first ones on this morning. But I'm really glad to see you. It's been a while that I went and saw you in person. Yeah, just a few months ago, it seems like, but maybe it was longer than that. And I'm glad I was able to make that visit, given the fact that we're all home at this point. So for my audience, let me introduce, I have Jill Watson. Jill is the Manager of Special Grants and Projects for Workforce Alliance, which is South Central Connecticut's Workforce Development Board. And Jill oversees multiple state and federal grants targeted to low-income and unemployed individuals, focused on creating measurable impacts in the areas of education and income stability. Jill, when you and I have talked before, we know we're a bunch of long-timers here, right? Jill actually began her career before me in workforce development I know you have me beat, not by much, but in 1989 as a provider of job training for adjudicated youth. And prior to that, you worked for 9 years prior to your current position, you worked for 9 years as the regional director for the South Central American Job Centers, providing administrative leadership and oversight to the 4 one-stop career centers and staff in the region. You have a Bachelor's of Arts in Poli-Sci from Gettysburg College and also have completed some coursework from the University of Connecticut School of Social Work. You've co-chaired the Economic Security Work Group of the Greater New Haven Continuum of Care, as well as the Connecticut Nursing Collaborative Action Coalition. Jill, it's always great to see you. Also joining us today is Ann Harrison, who is the Communications Director for Workforce Alliance. And you've been in that role almost 5 years, I see, Ann. And what's interesting about your background is you've actually been with Workforce Alliance since, well, you started with them in 2010
yes.
As a workforce development program, or as a training and employment program manager. And then you took a little hiatus for about 2.5 years and went over to as a workforce development program coordinator for Gateway Community College. And
Yes.
I know one of the great accomplishments you've had in your current role is the Workforce Today podcast, which really have a big following. I know I always enjoy them. And so you really launched that with Bill Villano as the host, and that's been really wildly successful and widely watched and listened to. And I don't know what your current count is, but I know it's up into the 20s for number of podcasts produced. Where do you stand today?
Right, we're over 20, we're at 23 episodes, and we're looking forward to getting back in the swing of things with that. It really got put to the wayside during this crazy last few minutes with COVID and, just basically managing day to day. But we've got some new interviews lined up, so we'll be launching again soon.
Awesome, great. So today I'm really excited to talk to you guys about what's happening primarily in your region in the state of Connecticut. I'm going to start with you, Ann. I'd love you to give our audience kind of an overview of the region and the current state of affairs in terms of whether your centers are open, closed, the impacts of COVID-19 on the regional economy, and maybe what's happening when it comes to racial equity and justice in your region.
Sure. So we are when this all happened, right, when that day happened in March, when suddenly everyone realized what needed to be done in terms of working remotely, we operate 4 centers in South Central Connecticut. There are close to 20 across the state, but as most states are, we're divided up regionally. So, but across the state, the American Job Centers and the Workforce Investment Board offices did close their doors, but we had to keep offering services, right, to our customers, both the job seeker customers and our employer customers. So once we made that decision, we quickly had to ramp up with what we could offer virtually. And one of the first things that we did was launched a page on our website dedicated to essential employers who had to keep hiring right in the midst of the crisis.
Right.
So we completely redesigned that page and made it very friendly to job seekers. With one click, basically, they could find out how to apply. But then also by doing it through our website, our business services team could help with the follow-up, which is always the challenge when you're applying for anything online, is how do I follow up? So we only posted things on our website that we knew we had a connection to and could actually, follow through with for employers. The other thing that we did was we wanted to keep offering something for folks to do that they could do at home. And we always had a really full calendar of workshops. And so we quickly mobilized to first just post those workshops, as basically slideshows online. And then with a little more time, we were able to actually go in and bring our facilitators in to record them so that people could watch an actual live person talking. And so we've continued to kind of add to that and update that over time. Just as free and open resources for really anybody. It's open source material on our website. We've shared it on social media. So I don't think we're, and other boards across the state, our sister board up at the Capital Region actually launched a hotline that people could call. Other boards across the state did similar things. So I'm sure it's across the country what boards and American Job Centers kind of mobilized to do as quickly as they could. And we've continued to do that over time. Of course, the people who work with businesses and job seekers did what they could through email, through phone, through video conferencing like we're doing now, and we've gotten better at all of that over time. Right now, we're looking at so our staff has started to come back into our offices on a staggered schedule. So we limit the number of people in any one place. And by the middle of July, we do plan to start to welcome back customers by appointment only. Of course, this is all contingent that we don't get a resurgence, right? We're very close to the original hotspot, which is New York City. But Connecticut has done an amazing job of really flattening the curve, and our positive tests and our hospitalizations and everything else is trending down. So right now it does look like we're going to be able to start those appointment only openings by mid-July, and then we will kind of take it from there. I think what's going to keep being normal for us is that virtual first, right? So we're going to keep doing as much as we can virtually so that the in-person becomes the exception and not the rule.
Yeah, exactly. And you guys did get hit pretty hard in your region early on, didn't you, with COVID infections throughout Connecticut. So I'm really glad to see that you're one of the states that's really been able to turn things around on that. Jill or Ann, you bring up such an important point, I think, for all of us that do this work, when you talked about how we immediately had to pivot, right, as an industry, and just figure out a way to to somehow get services out to the public. And I know you two ladies a little bit, and I think the three of us kind of share one trait, and that might be a trait of perfectionism. And so for people like us, to put something out there, first just getting something out there. You mentioned the workshops, and just starting somewhere and then improving on that over time, allowing yourself the time to get better. So I was really glad to hear you raise that point, because I think it's really important. I think, how quickly we all made stuff happen and how we're just continuing to develop and improve on that. So congratulations. So
thank you.
You're welcome. Did you, Jill, want to add anything else around just in general about your region and how it's impacted?
And actually, and I think one of the things that we are also been having conversations around was the racial equity. And you know, even in terms of reopening and looking what's happening in the state, we understand the impact on the low income individuals, the brown and black community in our region. And so Anne and the board worked together to put together an action statement for us, and maybe Anne could talk more about that. But I think that as we do look to reopen, we have to keep that also in our minds, and looking at the access is an issue in our communities, and so that needs to be in the forefront of everything we do. And as Anne said, you know, we got hit hard and early in Connecticut, and now we are starting to reopen. So I do hope that other states that are listening to what we're saying is, you know, as if you are shutting down, if you have to shut down, like Deborah just said, you have to be nimble, you have to think on your feet, but do it, and lessons learned. I mean, visit our website, see what's going on in New York and in Rhode Island and Connecticut and Massachusetts, because we had to adapt early and fast.
Yes.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think as you work through reopening your centers, and I've talked with other colleagues of yours around the country, people recognize that if we really do want, and we are, but in order to make sure that we are accessible to our marginalized populations, being able to offer some kind of in-person services in a very careful, well thought out way is really important to advancing that cause, because there isn't necessarily digital equity out there in our communities and access for some of the most marginalized communities. So you know, good luck as you guys begin to reopen. I know how thoughtfully you're doing that. I'm going to start with you, Jill, on this next question. You know, I understand that your new governor has formed a very active workforce development council that's very ambitious, and it's really focused on making sector partnerships a centerpiece. Share with our audience more about that.
Yes, we do have our new governor came in last year, and in under his administration, last year, right, Ian? I think it was last year. It might have been.
I think it was 2 years ago.
Was it 2 years ago? I don't remember now. The days have just blurred into everything.
Just blurred, yeah.
Anyway, so we have this new governor, sort of new, and his he has reinvigorated our state workforce board, and he brought in new individuals who have not been part of workforce, even though workforce is connected to it, and they really are trying to take a look at what is working elsewhere in the country, what has the data behind it that proves that things work, and trying to, you know, not throw out the baby with the bathwater, but really trying to take a look at what it is that they could bring into the state. So these sector partnerships, while I think, you know, under WIOA, we all kind of pivoted real quick around that, and there are models that are out there that, you know, all over the country and how this works, but our council has decided to use a model, and as if they're a name, I'm sorry if I don't remember it off the top of my head, Anne may recall, but it's a model that they're bringing from Washington State that they're going to try and implement here, and it really changes how we do sector business work, because the model that we've been operating under is more of when the workforce board is trying to be the convener. And in Connecticut, and as I'm sure as elsewhere, there are so many different partners and associations and, you know, advisory councils, and the schools have them, and it's so difficult to corral people into a common purpose. And so what they're trying to do is say, okay, business is going to take the lead. They're going to be the conveners, and then all of the partners, education, K-12, adult ed, workforce, we are what they call the silent partners. And that kind of flips our model here in Connecticut around quite a bit. So they have other things that they're trying to work on. Now we have CARES Act money that has come through. So they're trying to bring in new and fresh ideas around that. So they're keeping us quite busy, looking to change what we are doing.
Yeah, I think it's called Next Gen Sector Partnerships is the model. A woman named Lindsay Woolsey is a well-known expert in that field, and as Jill said, worked in Seattle. In addition to the Governor's Workforce Council in Connecticut, there's kind of been a leader appointed to that who came out of industry. His name is Garrett Moran, and he has really just begun organizing this effort in Connecticut. It'll be interesting to see how it comes together, because as Jill said, literally they have a model of, if people do sit around a table together, if that ever starts happening again, who gets to sit at the table and who literally has to sit around the outside and just listen. And right now in that model, that's workforce is kind of around the edge listening. And their other idea is that they get businesses on board and then those businesses recruit other businesses. And then of course, this is all to come back and inform whether it's workforce or K-12 or community action agencies on how to support that business first model. So it's just getting started, but it's definitely happening.
That's great. I'm actually familiar with that model. So I look forward to talking with you both more about that at another time, actually. Equus is very involved in working with NextGen as well, and we've had terrific success in the Carolinas with some projects like that. So I think you guys are right there at the forefront of what's going to turn out to be a very big movement. Is there a particular sector that you're focusing on, or sectors that you're focusing on first through this initiative? Or is it still in kind of the, really just orienting everyone?
Yeah, they're still really just sort of orienting. They were introducing the concept. Healthcare is a very large industry here, so I'm sure that will be, healthcare and manufacturing will probably be the two. IT, maybe. Right now, Yeah. But I think what the concept behind it is that it's actually locally driven, and it's actually not necessarily your sectors that you would traditionally say, okay, well, these are the largest in our region, so therefore we need to focus on that. That's actually not what it is. Is what industries do we need to grow, and what do we need to grow our people into? So so in our area, for example, bioscience is actually very large. It's just very difficult to break people into. Right. So how do you create that pathway starting in K-12 so that you are growing that industry? So it's more about the inclusive growth and economic development versus, okay, we have this large industry and how do we feed it? And so that's the difference in sort of the model, in that it's not really about that, it's what you want to grow. So that will be interesting.
Great. Well, good luck with that. It really is an exciting new approach and a very different role for workforce development to play, because sometimes through that process, my understanding is the first issues that come up may not even be workforce related, but some really cool stuff happens when you do put business at the center of those conversations, and really us and in education and other partners really around listening and responding to their needs. So good luck with that. Your team is intensely focused on collaborating with state economic and community development. So how is that playing out in your region specifically?
So when we talk about state economic development, that is all tied into that Governor's Workforce Council. So, and that's, again, it's another pivot point with our new governor, that really, he put someone in as the head of we call it DECD, Department of Economic and Community Development, someone who came right out of industry. And so what's happened since then is, there's this, and then we saw the development of the Workforce Council. So it's all very connected. And whether it's, and so going forward, they're also looking at changing some of the economic development policies around companies who add jobs or retain jobs, and kind of look at how that works and doesn't work in terms of incentives. So, you know, kudos to them for kind of having this holistic approach. So anything going forward, you know, it doesn't work, you know, well, DECD is doing this and workforce is doing that and the colleges are doing this, and, you know, it's all meant to start to work together. Of course, locally, you know, we are very connected to the local business community through the chambers of commerce, through regional, you know, development corporations, and the like, and regional planning heads too. So Jill mentioned a lot happens locally, and then, but then a lot is happening on a statewide basis as well.
For us in Connecticut, it is a shift, and actually, honestly, because of what has just happened with COVID, if you look at, and because Department of Labor became so overwhelmed with unemployment claims, this actually is a good way for us to stay involved, because they've basically shut down everything else. They're not really doing anything else, so understandably so. But now this is actually prime opportunity to shift over to economic development, because now we need to grow industries. We need to get the economy going again. Let DOL focus on UI, and this is kind of where we need to be going. They have some of the CARES Act money that is being released. They're going to put it through DECD, which for us is one of the first times I've seen that happen in Connecticut. So, you know, more to come on that. I think it's interesting, and hopefully this is a new direction for us.
Right.
Great. So Jill, I want to ask you some questions about, I know your team is committed to the 2Gen approach. So what are some of the ways that you support 2Gen through your organization and operationally?
Right now, we've been doing 2Gen in work for the last, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 years I've been involved with it. The state of Connecticut is actually unique in the country in that there is state legislation that formed an advisory group back in 2014 or 15. And since then, they've been slowly working with our Office of Early Childhood and Education to put policies and things in place that help move not just children or not just adults, but move the family as one. And what's been interesting now, I think that if you really take a look at some of these racial equity issues that are coming up in some of the industries that the women mostly work in, that are low paying, and how do you now look at that and say, you know, this is, people get it now, this impacts families. So how do we change what we're doing so that these families have the opportunities to move in a meaningful way? You know, people have talked about it for years and years, and I think that bringing education and early childhood education into workforce and being advocates for daycare, which I think that we need to be, is really a role that we can take as to move families along, and looking at industries that don't necessarily pay the best wages and don't move people even though they've been there, and really, you know, and is it really colorblind, you know? And so how do you promote policies that move people, that that help families? And so that's, I think, where we were really trying to work in our, not only in the one-stops, because I think that you know, having the resources and information that people need to support themselves and move their families is huge, but it has to be broader than that. So I think, you know, working with our local state and government, but also, you know, the state of Connecticut, and really looking at the benefits cliffs, and what does that mean when if you say, okay, pay everyone $15 an hour, well, what does the benefit cliff mean to people? So we've been intensely focusing on those kinds of issues, and I'm hoping that, you know, really tying in that racial equity will make it, I don't know what the word is, to people will hear it, I hope, a little bit more right now.
No, I think that's
what's interesting. Go ahead, Ann.
No, I think you said it really well. And, you know, we, as a lot of organizations did, we issued a statement kind of putting our beliefs into action is what we called it around racial equity. And one of the things we wanted to do was set out some steps that we would take that could be measurable and not just make a statement against something, but for something as well. One of those statements had to do with what Jill was just talking about, not necessarily mentioning to Jen, but the issues of access to daycare subsidies, access, benefit cliffs and being able to keep your benefits while working, and transportation too. It's not always looked at as a racial issue, but people need to be able to get to and from where the jobs are, and they shouldn't be limited to those opportunities because the buses don't run when they need to, or in Connecticut's case, one early thing that we were able to recommend to this new governor's workforce council was to actually extend some benefits that are in place right now relating to transportation that are only open to full-time college students, to folks who are, just taking more short-term trainings, right? And kind of making that equitable, so that, because not everybody can afford to, time or money-wise, to go to school full-time, but everybody could use better access to transportation. So, the more we look at things through that lens of racial equity, the more we realize how important all of these things really are.
Absolutely. And, two-gen and whole family approaches have been around a while, and people in the workforce industry, including you guys for certain, have been very focused on those things. But what's you never like to say there's opportunity in COVID-19, but if there is a silver lining to COVID-19, I think that it's really illuminated how intersected all of these issues are beyond our community, beyond the people who are focused on these issues full time. I think everyone, every employer out there understands the value of quality daycare and education and all of that. And now they're seeing what happens when those things become compromised, right? As has happened with COVID-19. And certainly, as we've seen the imbalance of impact on marginalized populations, a lot of people may not have paid attention to that because it wasn't in their daily life. They don't do this work for a living, but I think it's really come to the forefront for everyone these days. So that's, to me, the silver lining and what's really been just a very difficult and unprecedented time. So as you look to the future, and either one of you could take this first, let's say 2 years from now. So let's look beyond COVID, okay? Because let's hope in 2 years that's all behind us. What do you predict this? Give me one or two predictions of what this work will look like. Because I think what we're learning today will stay with us, because the genie's out of the bottle. I don't think the genie's going back in. So I'd love to get from you guys one or two, your thoughts on what this might look like a couple of years post-COVID.
Well, I think that the first thing that comes to mind is digital equity and digital literacy. I think we've realized through this process what a gap that is for the people that we serve, and again, quickly mobilized with funding partners to be able to provide people with laptops, things a lot of people take for granted. Oh, you can just do it from home. Well, when the libraries are closed and the Starbucks closes for Wi-Fi access or anything else, people honestly it's not that easy, and not everything can be done on your phone. So I think that digital literacy piece is going to be important, as, again, it's going to be the normal thing to do things online versus the exception. So we need to make sure that our customers have access to that, not only to the broadband access, but also to the hardware that they need to be able to take a training online, to be able to apply for a job online, to be able to do a new job orientation online. We've worked with people who have onboarded right through COVID, and it's all been online. So, and then making sure people are comfortable with all of that. It's not just enough to throw the stuff at them and say, okay, you got it, figure it out. I had a hard time figuring all this out this morning. So, right. So I think that us as a workforce board and across the country, that's going to be pivotal to make things work for people going forward.
Excellent. Jill, anything to add to that?
Well, I was on a webinar from the Aspen Institute they held the other day on daycare, and they had a woman on from British Columbia, and their a program that they've been working on, I won't call it a program, they call them prototypes or daycare centers, and their slogan is $10 a day for daycare. But one of the things that the woman that was presenting said that right now during COVID, their new slogan is there's no recovery without a she-covery, and there's no she-covery without daycare. And I think that, you know, in 2 years from now, there has to be a change. People are figuring this out. If kids are going to be in school and are not in school and are going to be at home part-time, and people have to do things in their houses, that's not going to work. You have to figure this out for people. And the way the daycare is so expensive, and who are you putting in? What, you know, who's going to fill those jobs when you're making, you know, $7 an hour? So how do we elevate that as a profession and move people in it and create the space that people need in order to get quality childcare? So I think that's going to be, you know, so in the way education looks, I think education is going to look completely different. But I do worry about the equality and equity gaps that will continue to grow between the haves and have-nots. I don't see that reducing until, you know, again, the digital literacy and the digital access is going to be another obstacle in terms of skills that the workforce board needs to address rapidly. Right. And education needs to address it as well. And business, exactly.
Right.
You know.
Well, excellent. Well, our time is up, so those were great final thoughts to leave us with. Again, Jill Watson, Ann Harrison from the Workforce Alliance in South Central Connecticut. Thank you for joining us today at Live at the Forum. And please pass along my greetings and good wishes to your leader and my friend, Bill Villano. So thank you again for joining us. Have a great rest of the conference. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.